Hey bros, I'm Frank. This is a video review of the Nerf Rebelle Fearless Fire. This blaster is a cylinder-fed flywheel blaster in the Rebelle line. Let's get into the review. Included is the blaster itself, a few Rebelle darts, which are different colors because that's, tactical, I suppose. The instructions, the decoder thing, as well as the pin that writes the coded messages. I was mistaken. This does not write coded messages. This is totally visible to the naked eye. You don't even need the little decoder pin. Lame sauce, so not tactical. This is a battery-powered blaster. It will not function without batteries, so to install the batteries, you can first remove this screw here, pull the little tray off, and that exposes the battery tray. This blaster runs on 4 AA batteries. And reinstall the tray, and you're good to go. Now let's go over the externals and function in a bit more detail, of course starting up with the front. This blaster does not have an N-Strike front attachment nozzle like many of the Rebelle blasters. This thing is a front vertical grip. It is rather small following the theme of the Rebelle line, but it is pretty comfortable, ergonomic, very smooth. Here's a sling mount or a front iron sight corresponding with the rear iron sight right here. Up top is an access door. If you have any jams, you can open that to stick your finger in there to clear out the jam. Put your finger in it. And also up top is an N-Strike tactical rail if you want to attach an optic or anything like that. Down here is the cylinder or barrel system. This thing holds 20 darts, which is pretty high capacity. To load, you can just front load, very simple, and this can free spin like that to fully load up. Although when you're firing, of course, you don't have to rotate it. When you pull the trigger, it rotates by itself. Down below, here's the grip. This is a Rebelle blaster, and it's a little bit downsized compared to a lot of the N-Strike blasters, so as an adult, I think it's a little bit too small, but for other people, like smaller people, like children, it's probably just fine. Trigger pull is pretty standard for a flywheel blaster. If anything, it's actually a little bit smoother than a lot of other flywheel blasters like the Strife that has just a few too many mechanical locks. That's not so great in unmodified form. But this blaster has a nice trigger pull, so it's nice and smooth, pretty comfortable. Then this blue trigger down here is, of course, the rev trigger. That's how you get the motors to rev up. This is a flywheel blaster. If you've never used one of those, you have to push the bottom trigger first. Then once it's revving like that, then you pull the primary top trigger to actually fire the darts. The grip is pretty small, like I said, and this is a thumb hole stock with a restriction down here, so it makes it even a little bit more cramped for bigger people or, ordinary sized humans. And then to the stock up top is the battery tray, which I already showed you. This blaster doesn't function without the batteries because it's a flywheel blaster. There's no way to manually operate it. And a rear sling attachment point back here if you want to use that. The stock length is, of course, super short, fitting the Rebelle line, and most Nerf blasters right now have really little stocks, but honestly I don't think you'll want to shoulder this blaster anyways. When I first saw it, I thought that looks exactly like a Tommy gun. I want to run around and do this like some type of mobster in New York City or something. I think the colors are a little bit off of the Tommy gun. I think that's mostly black and brown, but whatever, imagination, it's powerful. Those are the externals and basic function. Once again, you front load, pull the trigger, and it fires. It's a flywheel blaster. Here's some firing. Nerf foam, St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I assume the mob version was a bit more violent. As you can see, firing the blaster is pretty fun. 20 dart capacity is pretty high for, non-magazine fed blasters. And the reload rate, of course, is not going to be as fast as a magazine fed blaster because you can't just throw in a full magazine. But if you don't like mags for whatever reason, because you just hate modern, really efficient technology, then this would be a nice alternative. I put this blaster up on the chrono and it's getting an average velocity of about 69 giggity feet per second, which is pretty normal right now for the Nerf Elite blasters. The Elite average right now is about 70 feet per second, so plus or minus 6 or 7 feet per second really isn't that noticeable, so this is like right on the dot of 70 feet per second. And of course that means your firing velocity, performance, and all of that is going to be in line with all the other Elite blasters right now. Of course your rate of fire is dependent on how fast you pull the trigger, but being a semi-automatic flywheel blaster, very few blasters right now will be able to outperform this, although quite a few of them will be equal to. So now getting to my personal opinion on this blaster, overall, I think it's a little bit too small for adults and people my size. My hands are larger than average, so I feel a little bit cramped on this platform, and it's just really small overall. Although it's pretty unique on the market right now because it's a cylinder-fed, not a magazine-fed flywheel blaster with a decent capacity. It definitely has a role. I know some HVZ things, they block certain magazine limits. Sometimes the cylinder blasters would be allowed allowed in, although I'm pretty sure they'd have to make a new rule to ban a flywheel blaster with this capacity. But until they amend the rules, you can totally just wreck their game with this type of blaster. A little bit too small for me, and I personally just really dig magazines. I don't really have a place for a cylinder-fed blaster. That being said, I didn't have any jams, malfunctions, or anything like that. If you have smaller hands or just not massive hands, it's probably super comfortable for you. And I definitely can't point out any objective disqualifications on this blaster saying, hey, don't buy this blaster because of this or whatever, because it works just fine. And it's just my personal opinion and play style that leads me to use magazines and larger platforms. But a super fun blaster to use, especially if you're trying to go for the mobster look or whatever. I mean, it's kind of like a Tommy gun shooting from the hip, like get one of those top hats or whatever. I don't know how mobsters dress. Gotta stop before I go all the way down that tangent lane. But yeah, that's my overview and opinion on the Fearless Fire. Hopefully I've given you all the information you need to decide whether or not you want to purchase one. I will put a buy link in the description box below to where I purchased it, but that's my review. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Frank, and as always, stay tactical.